Here we are at example 3, but before we dive into him, we're going to go ahead and look at this idea of intercepts. Now, to find an intercept, we're pretty much just going to let the other variable be equal to 0, and by the other variable, I mean if we're looking for our x-intercept, we're going to let our y variable be 0. If we're looking for our y-intercept, we're going to let x be 0. And graphically, the reason for that is if we're trying to figure out our x-intercept, let's say he happens to be right here, notice we are going positive some x. It could also be some negative x. But our y values are not going up or down any. And that's why it's always going to be 0 then for that y value if you're looking for an x-intercept. And that's exactly why for this example, they let y be equal to 0. Because again, you're seeing where's it crossing this x-axis, so that y value is not moving up or down any. That's why it's 0. And then from here, it's actually just trying to solve for your x variable. So they added 4 on both sides. Now that this absolute value is isolated, is equal to some number, they did our split, much like we saw in chapter 1, and then they just solved for each one appropriately. So then the x-intercepts came out to be 7, 0, and -1, 0. So pretty much here would be one of those points, 7, 0. Notice it is crossing the x-axis. We're not moving up or down any for y. And then -1, 0. So it'd be about here. All right. Now, on the flip side, if you wanted to figure out where is it crossing this y-axis, well, again, you're not moving left or right any for x. It's crossing somewhere on this y-axis. So x is going to be 0 there. Because again, you're not moving left or right any for x. And that's exactly why then they just said x is going to be 0. So then they threw in 0 for x. 0 minus 3 came out to be -3. Absolute value of -3 comes out to be +3. And then you, this should say, yeah, this should say subtracting 4. So then 3 minus 4 came out to be -1. So the y-intercept here came out to be 0, -1. And so ultimately in the end for this v, it should at least do something like this for that absolute value function. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about example 3 and try finding these. So for example 3 it says find these x and y intercepts with the following absolute value equations. Well, again, to find our x-intercepts, we're going to let y be equal to 0. So then we end up with 0 is equal to the absolute value of x plus 2 minus 1. And from here, just trying to solve for x. So we would add 1 to both sides. It's equal to the absolute value of x plus 2. Now that our absolute value is isolated, equals some number, we can go ahead and do our split. So then we end up with x plus 2 is equal to +1, and x plus 2 is equal to -1. Notice I'm not changing at all that x plus 2. Only the answers are being where you see that sign flip. Next, we just solve for x. So here you subtract 2, end up with x is equal to -1. Here when we subtract 2, we end up with x is equal to -3. So then it looks like our x-intercepts happen at -1, 0 and -3, 0. Notice it's an actual point though. Okay, if you were to solve for x, that is the spot where it's happening. It's the x value that you're seeing that intercept. But again, since you're intercepting the axis, that's happening at a point. All right, so just keep that in mind. The correct answer comes out to be a point. If you're trying to figure out the y-intercept, we're going to let x be 0. So then we end up then with y is equal to the absolute value of 0 plus 2 minus 1. 0 plus 2 comes out to be 2. Absolute value of 2 comes out to be 2. So then it looks like this y-intercept comes out to be 1, happening at 1. But again, that point would be 0 because we threw 0 in for x, comma, 1, our y value.